Hey guys, I got a brand new video for you today, and I don't really like making these videos where I just talk. I'd rather go out and show you guys stuff. But there's been a lot of new developments in the camera world, and I was on a shoot yesterday, basically the entire day, and I kind of missed out on all the new Sony A9 news. But in this video, I want to talk about the new Sony A9, I want to talk about the GH5 autofocus issues, and I want to talk about the new 5D Mark IV firmware update. And yeah, let's get into it right now. Finally, the rumors are out, and some of them are good, some of them aren't as crazy as we thought they were going to be. Starting with the specs, it's a 24 megapixel stacked CMOS sensor, which is apparently a new sensor that has never been used before, and it has like 20 times the data transfer speed. That's what Sony's claiming compared to the last generation sensors they're using, and that should be really good because this is the main feature this camera has, and that's 20 FPS continuous shooting in the camera. It'll do up to 241 RAW, 362 JPEG images. So the buffer is massively increased, and this camera is going to be awesome for sports shooters. And people just like to hold the trigger down. It's got silent vibration-free shooting up to 1/32 thousandths of a second. Of course, that's going to be vibration-free because it's the electronic shutter. We got a quad VGA 3.68 million dot OLED EVF, and that's at 120 FPS refresh rate. And that is a really high resolution EVF. That's really close to the GH5, which I'm filming on right now. Got 693 phase detection autofocus points. Come on, just keep throwing autofocus points in your cameras because, you know, you could probably put 20,000 autofocus points if you want to. Sony is going crazy with autofocus points, and I thought they were crazy before with like the A6500. This covers pretty much the entire sensor, and obviously the autofocus is going to be really good on this camera. It's got dual SD card slots. Everyone's been kind of hoping and dreaming for that in a Sony camera. Both of them are actually UHS-ii, so that's going to be good for speed. A new battery, which is pretty awesome. I didn't think they would ever change the battery. This one's supposed to be 2.2 times the capacity versus the old NP, whatever, FW50. I think that's what the name of the battery was called. It's got an Ethernet port, obviously mic and headphone jacks, Bluetooth, and Wi-Fi. So this camera really wasn't designed for video too much. Obviously it shoots 4K, similar to all the other cameras. It does a 6K to 4K downscaling, just like the A6300 and A6500. And the problem with that, well, there's good and bad. So the good is that it's actually really awesome 4K video. The bad side is you start getting some rolling shutter, and not some, you get a lot of rolling shutter. But maybe with this new sensor, 20 times the data transfer speed, maybe there'll be less rolling shutter on this camera, I'm not too sure. But I don't think the focus really was on video on this camera, and that brings me to the fact that it has no S-Log 2 or S-Log 3, probably because I think what they're going to do is come out with the A9S, and that'll be the, you know, the video camera like the A7S. So talking about some of the dial changes, obviously they added a new dial to the top of the camera that allows you to select your autofocus / manual focus settings and stuff like that, so you don't really have to go into the menu and change it. And they also added a joystick for being able to select your autofocus points, and they moved the record button from the side of the camera, the little tiny record button that was really awkward and was a terrible idea. They've now moved to more to the middle top of the camera and made the button bigger, so thumbs up, basically. That's what everyone would have wanted. So it kind of sounds like Sony listened to their users and kind of crafted a camera. The only issue for me is that the price is ridiculous. $4,500 in the US and $6,000 in Canada. So this camera obviously kind of falls into the category of the 1DX Mark II and the D5. It's supposed to kind of compete with those cameras. The problem for me with this camera is that for a sports shooter camera, you want something that fits your hand nice and has better ergonomics. And the Sony cameras have always been kind of about keeping the camera small as possible. And I think this camera might be a little bit bigger than the A7 cameras, I'm not sure. But for someone who's shooting sports and having big telephoto lenses, this little tiny camera might be kind of awkward. It might be tough to try and pull away some of those Canon and Nikon users to switch to this camera. Along with this camera, they also released a new telephoto lens, and obviously that's what their goal was to make this camera for sports shooters and wildlife shooters, I guess. And yeah, so this camera's probably not for me. I probably won't ever buy it, but it looks like they're actually improving upon last gen's cameras and making something that people really want. Okay, so enough about the A9. You can go check out, there's lots of videos. People went to the Sony event and made videos on it. And let's talk about the 5D Mark IV firmware update. So Canon Rumors was kind of teasing everyone with this new firmware update that was going to lower the crop factor in 4K video, add a bunch of other features to the camera, C-Log and stuff like that. Well, the new firmware kind of doesn't work the way that we thought it was going to. Basically, to me, this is kind of crazy. So basically what you got to do the new firmware update and get C-Log, which is Canon's log profile on the camera, you have to send the camera away, and it's going to cost $99, and they're going to do some kind of a firmware update and add C-Log to your camera and send it back. But starting in July, basically you can get your camera with all these features already on it, but they're going to add an extra $100 to the price. Now I think this is pretty crazy. It's kind of along the same lines as Panasonic adding Vlog to your camera by paying $100, but this you actually have to send your camera away in order to get C-Log. So I want to root for Canon, but they're just doing things so weird. So basically, if you want C-Log, you gotta send your camera away, and then you're out, and then you're without a camera for who knows how long. I was kind of getting excited looking at Canon rumors when they were talking about the crop factor and C-Log and stuff like that. Actually, I think they were talking about adding 3K, like 60 frames per second, which I would be happy with because you can use that. And lastly, I just want to talk about the GH5 Autofocus because everyone by now knows that it's not very good. You know, Max did some tests. Photo Joseph was doing tests, and his tests were more successful than Max's, except Max actually spent way more time doing his tests. And, well, that's not to say that Joseph didn't spend time. He probably spent time. It's just that he showed the more successful times that it worked. Anyway, they kind of called each other out and decided to get together and work on a video showing the autofocus and their best settings to get the most effective autofocus out of the camera. And to be honest, I know the video wasn't a waste of time, but basically when it came down to it, they had a lot of issues, and it seems like kind of the lens you use matters most. After around that same time, Panasonic actually came up with a statement, and they gave it to Photo Joseph, and the statement that Panasonic had was, we recommend to select the one area AF in 30p or 60p frame rate for more comfortable autofocus speed. When you select 24p, one area autofocus is recommended. If you're still experiencing slower than desired AF, Panasonic suggests you override the AF by pressing the shutter button down halfway. Panasonic pledges to further improve the autofocus quality. So basically, they're just saying to use the center point, which actually I found worked the best. And, you know, that's actually what I usually use on my Sony camera too when I'm using autofocus, is just have the center point because it's kind of more reliable. It doesn't have to like hunt around. It's just going to focus on what's in the middle. I still find it very unreliable, but it does work a little bit better. And, yeah, like I was saying, when Max and Photo Joseph did those tests, there was not really massive improvements when they were trying to come up with some kind of result. Obviously, the camera isn't the worst. You can get some results that work if you have proper lighting and something kind of like what's behind me where there's not too much distracting background stuff. Also, I want to mention too that if you go into the extended manual, Panasonic actually says themselves that the autofocus isn't going to work too well. If you look in the extended manual, which you can only find online, doesn't come with the camera, it says, sometimes difficult to focus with autofocus when recording 4K motion pictures. Panasonic saying this phenomenon occurs when the camera is trying to record highly accurate focus at reduced autofocus speeds, and this is not a malfunction. So basically Panasonic saying that autofocus isn't going to be very good while recording 4K video anyway. So basically they need to come up with a firmware update to address this situation. I don't know if they can fix it, but there's a lot of people that are mad. I'm not mad. I love this camera. I'm shooting with it right now. It's been like probably one of my most favorite cameras to shoot video with, and you know, I don't necessarily need autofocus, so it's not a big deal for me, but I know that there are a lot of people out there that do want autofocus on this camera, and they're really mad and not happy that the autofocus sucks. Buy a Sony. That solves your problem. That's all I gotta say. Anyway, guys, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you dislike this video, give it a thumbs down twice, and I'll see you in the next one. This is a continuous autofocus test, 24p 4K. Using the center point, exactly what Panasonic recommends. I'm shooting at f2.8 using the 42.5mm f1.7 Panasonic lens, and I have a feeling that it's probably just the lens because this is terrible and there's no reason why this shouldn't be focusing on me. I mean, it's kind of working, but it's like the slowest thing in the universe. I'm not using any custom settings. I'm just using straight up whatever the main default settings are, and it's pretty bad. But that's what you can expect with this lens on this camera using the settings that they recommend.